This is one of those steps where you only get one shot, and I've never done this before. Before I touch anything else on this rebind, I want to round the corners of the text block. Now this came with a hardcover book, which usually means square corners, and you can absolutely keep them square. Here's an example. It's from my first ever rebind, so don't judge me too harshly. Here's an example of square corners on a rebind. In this case, I want round corners. It makes the rebind feel a bit more unique, and honestly, I just like the look. I've seen a few methods for this, but today I'm trying one that uses a fresh Razer Blade and sandpaper to refine the shape. So with that, let's get started. Now the first thing I'm going to do is flip through all the pages and make sure that none of the corners are folded over on themselves. All right, everything looks good on that front. For the next part, we want to make sure that the text block is very, very straight along this edge and this edge, or at least as straight as possible. One thing about text blocks is that they are not always perfectly square. So that's just something to keep in mind. Because this is a glued spine, it will probably stay in this shape a little bit better than if we had a sewn binding. That looks pretty good. We're going to take our razor blade and we're going to cut off a very small amount. You can always take off more later if you need to, or you can take it off when you go on to the sanding step. We're going to take off about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16. I'm just going to do a very, very small amount. All right, we're going to do our best to keep the razor vertical and put equal pressure across the whole thing. That's scary. Oh, it works very well, but it's also terrifying. There's that done, and that went a lot smoother than I expected it to on my first try. I'm going to be completely honest. Looks like there's a couple of them that did not get cut through. So I'm going to do that real quick. See if I'm able to anyway. Yeah, there we go. So there is the rounded edge. It's not perfect, but we'll work through it. And then here is the straight edge. So now I'm going to go in with some sandpaper. I'll probably start with 180 grit and just kind of work these edges down a little bit and see if I can't get this to be a little bit more even, because it's not perfect. So I'm going to start off with some 180 grit sandpaper. Now in the video I watched, they fanned the pages out like this. Try and get everything a little bit smoother. I'm mainly focusing on right here because it's a little bit thinner than the other spots. Honestly, I think it's working pretty well. It's evening it out a little bit at the very least. And this is going to be very far from perfect, but that's okay. Honestly, that's not terrible. For a first attempt, at least. Don't get me wrong. This is definitely not a professional grade, but for a first attempt, I'll take it. And then what you do after you get it evened out a little bit is you begin to go from the middle and work your way out towards the edges. There's going to be kind of 2 ridges since we only made 1 cut here. And we just want to try and smooth that out as much as possible. Thinking I might should have taken a little bit more off, but I'll do that on my next corner. All right, and then we'll do the same thing on the other side. I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm leaving behind a couple of black spots on the paper. It's just from the sandpaper kind of coming into contact with it. I will be dyeing the edges, so I'm not too worried about it. Let's keep going. I'm gonna try it from this side now. Yeah, it's not great, but I think it's just where this was the initial cutting point. Maybe I started it a little bit thicker on this part right here. I think I need to bring the curve a little bit further down on this side, and then I'll call it good for this. Okay. So there's the 180 grit. I'm going to go over it with 220 grit as well. That one will be probably a little bit quicker just because we kind of have the general shape now. It's not perfect, but honestly, it doesn't look too bad. All right, so here's the 220 grit. I'll just go over this doing kind of the same thing here. Now, I am far from an expert at sanding, so if I'm doing something wrong, feel free to let me know. And that looks pretty good. I may go up to a 400 grit. I haven't really decided. What I think I'm going to do actually is do this corner. I'll finish that up. Yeah, I'll do that real quick and then come right back. All right, so I have completed the other corner now. I accidentally cut a little bit further back from the corner than I did on the first one, but overall, I'm happy with it. I think I kind of like it a touch more actually, but for a first attempt, I'm really happy with how this turned out. So one thing that I meant to mention that I forgot to is you want to cut the slightest bit off because you don't want to be cutting into anything that might be on the pages. This is a songbook, so I'm not too worried about it. But if you were doing this with, let's say, a Bible or a regular book, you might encounter some issues there. There was my first attempt at rounding the corners of a text block. Overall, I think it went okay. I could do better and get a little bit more consistent with it. I had one incident here where I cut in and then came back some, but there was my first attempt at rounding the corners of a text block. Overall, I'm fairly happy with how it turned out. I think I will obviously get better at it with practice. I could do a lot better, mainly with the consistency of the corners when I'm cutting and when I'm sanding. But this step was very important to do right now because the next step is dyeing the page edges. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in that video.